This is Matthew Cratter from Bitcoin University, and today I wanted to talk about the digital transformation of property. And I think the form that's going to take is, of course, Bitcoin. This is something we've witnessed over the past 25 years. We've witnessed the digitization of mail, of music, of video, of social networks, and the list really goes on and on with the internet revolution. And I think that now Bitcoin is about to digitize investment property. So yes, you'll still need a house or apartment to live in, obviously, but property as an investable asset just got a lot more interesting. Now, what are some of the problems with traditional analog investment properties? We've covered many of those in the past two videos in which this is part of this series. First one was called Why Bitcoin is Much Better Than Real Estate. The second one was Why Real Estate is a Bad Inflation Hedge and all the problems that come in a high inflationary environment when it comes to repair costs and maintenance costs. Your investment property, and I'm including investment properties in general, so ranches, rental houses, apartment buildings, duplexes, office buildings, everything from a very small rental house to a large building. These investment properties cannot be moved to another country or jurisdiction. This is one of the biggest problems with them that we've talked about. And so if your government turns hostile, your investment property becomes a stranded asset that cannot be taken with you if you're forced to leave the country. Another problem is your government can massively increase the taxes on your investment property, and you really have no choice. You have to pay those taxes or risk government confiscation of your property. And the main problem with this is that real estate investment properties are not mobile. Otherwise, there'd be a better way of fighting back. You can, of course, sell your property, and that is one way that people fight this. But then you incur capital gains taxes. The government gets its pound of flesh one way or another. Also, if the government just decides that you're a quote unquote bad person, it can simply seize your property, and there's not much that you can do, even in the system of private property and courts, etc., and constitutional protections in the U.S., we still have property being seized under various programs that you're probably aware of. So if the government seizes your property, there's not much that you can do. If you're really lucky, you'll get it back after spending huge amounts of money and wasting your time in court. Now, maybe you're saying at this point in the video, who really cares? That's a problem for rich people. I don't even own my own house. And that's fine, but I think the point here, the larger point, is if you understand that global billionaires and other really wealthy people and sovereign states and nation states and central banks, etc., if you understand that this group of people will want to own a lot of something in the future, wouldn't it make sense to front run them and buy a little bit now while it's still so cheap? And I think this is true of Bitcoin. When you own Bitcoin, you're afforded the same protections and privileges as billionaires who own Bitcoin. And when you stop to think about it, that's really an unbelievable thing. There's really no other investment that you can say the same thing about. In the same way that music and videos and mail have been moved into the digital realm by the internet, I think Bitcoin is about to transform property for all of these reasons, because of all these flaws with analog property. So I would say forget about various metaverses or quote unquote the metaverse. These things will always be controlled by Silicon Valley venture capitalists or people like Mark Zuckerberg or possibly the US government itself. And I think that properties in a centrally controlled walled garden like these will always be much less desirable than digital property on the Bitcoin blockchain. And I'm talking about the token, of course, BTC. If a central entity can rug you in the real world with your apartment building or rental property, why in the world would you want to move that money to invest in another property in the digital world, in the metaverse, that can be rugged by Zuck or VCs or the US government? And I think this is why Bitcoin is such an important development. It represents what I put in the title here, which is the digital transformation of property. And so if you have savings that you'd like to pass on to your children, your grandchildren, or even your future retired self, if you have savings that you would like to be available to you anywhere in the world on a moment's notice, if you have savings that you would like to be protected from central bank money printing and debasement and government confiscation, there's really only one asset class that has real decentralization, real deep liquidity, ample market cap for large investors, censorship resistance, unchanging monetary policy that was fixed at the outset and has never been changed by a human being and is very, very difficult to change by the community, as well as the security guarantees that come from Bitcoin, both from private public key cryptography and the wall of encrypted energy produced by Bitcoin miners, which is how Michael Saylor likes to characterize it. I like that phrase, encrypted encrypted energy. If you want these things, the only asset that really qualifies is Bitcoin. And this is a really exciting point in history here in 2023. Now is your chance to front run both the BlackRock ETF and the billionaires of the world and all the other ETFs, all the institutional demand, all the nation state demand, all the central bank demand that will come for the rarest, scarcest digital asset in the world. So Bitcoin represents this digital transformation of property that the internet has started, and now Bitcoin is continuing. And Bitcoin is still going to be around in 100 years from now, even after your wealthy friend's beachfront property has fallen into the ocean, another problem with analog property, or that property has been seized by some government bureaucrat in order to protect the western snowy plover or the California least tern, which are these beach birds that often give a government an excuse to confiscate private property or to impose restrictions on it. I think this is something that, this is at least my interpretation of what Michael Saylor is getting at in this tweet, where everyone knows that Bitcoin is important as the separation, as a way of trying to force money and the state apart, as a separation of money and state. But I like this tweet: the separation of property and earth is as important as the separation of money and state. And I think this is definitely a much easier sell as well. If you go out there in public and say, I want to separate money and state, you may get some people very upset with you whose livelihoods depend on the union of money and state. But if you just say, I want to separate property and earth, I want to digitize my wealth and put it in a place where it's beyond the reach of taxes and bureaucrats and confiscation and censorship, I think this makes a lot more sense. And this is definitely what a lot of the world's billionaires are going to figure it out, I think Michael Saylor was just ahead of the game here with this phrase, the separation of property and earth. So the conclusion is, if you have a real estate investment property, we're not talking about the house that you live in, though of course you could sell that and buy Bitcoin. People have done that, as I've discussed on this channel. But especially if you have a second house or rental property, it might be a really good idea, I think, to sell it and put the proceeds into Bitcoin. Do your own research, of course. Bitcoin is very volatile, but I do have over 1,000 videos, I think, on this channel at this point that discuss these things. This isn't investment advice, but I think if you look at the long arc of the last 30 years and you see how things are becoming digitized, I think this is another way that really Bitcoin benefits from this and is the recipient of huge capital inflows because of its properties. If you found this video helpful, be sure to hit that subscribe and like buttons. Hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when I publish my next video, and let me know your questions and comments in the comment section below. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.